Good morning, everyone. We'll continue here in the words of the RAMBAM, Hilchos Talmud Torah, Perek Gimel, the third chapter. Today is Halacha Daled, number 4. Hayulafon of Asiyas Mitzvah v'Talmud Torah. Let's say, now we've been speaking about this entire time, the greatness of Talmud Torah, of learning Torah. It's a mitzvah that's keneged kol ha-mitzvahs. It's one mitzvah that is equivalent to all the other mitzvahs in the Torah. It's what's maybe lidei ma'aseh, brings you to action. So now let's say the following, says the RAMBAM. Hayu lefanav asiyas mitzvah Talmud Torah. There's a mitzvah standing in front of you. And there's also the mitzvah to learn Torah. For example, let's say it's time for you to daven shachris, but you'd also like to learn. Im efshar lemitzvah la'asais ha'yidei acherim la'yafsik talmudai. Now, if it's a mitzvah that can be done by someone else, so then you continue learning and you don't stop, because Talmud Torah is keneged kulam. It's the most important mitzvah. For example, let's say that there's a fellow in shul who needs a chesed, he needs a ride from your shul to his work. So there's 3 of you standing there. One of you is learning. The other 2 guys are sitting around, shooting the breeze, having their coffee. And the guy says, I'm sorry, could one of you do me a chesed? Could you take me to my work? So since that there's 2 other people over there that are not learning, and they themselves could end up getting involved in the mitzvah of chesed, so then you who are busy with your Gemara opened up and you're learning Torah, you don't close the Gemara, you leave the mitzvah to somebody else, and you let them go and do it, and you continue learning. But if it's a mitzvah that's impossible to do on anybody else, V'im lav, but if not, for example, like we said, it's time for you to daven shachris. It's time for you to put on your tefillin. It's time for you to shake the lulav and the esrog. It's your father that's asking you for the ride, and therefore you have a mitzvah of kibbutz ve'im, to honor your father and your mother. You must now give him the ride. So then v'im lav yaseh mitzvah. Then you got to close the Gemara, and you have to go and do the mitzvah that's in front of you. However, adds the RAMBAM, v'yachzir l'toirasai, but once that you finish the mitzvah, then return to your Torah, which means go back to what is the biggest and the best mitzvah in the world, and that is learning. There's a beautiful ma'aseh from the days of Shanghai when the Mir Yeshiva narrowly escaped the Nazi regime, Yamach Shemayim, and they ended up in Shanghai. One of the great Talmidei Chachamim that was there at the time was a Yid by the name of Rav Mendel Kaplan, and he was put in charge of dealing with governmental issues when things were going on. And very often there were days that he had to go for hours and hours and hours on end, leave the Beis Midrash, go to the government offices, deal with the foreign affairs, and it could be hours and hours on end that he would be doing this. And of course, while he was there, he had to be holding in the conversations and the paperwork and the meetings that he was having, and he wasn't able to learn. However, everybody said the following: the minute that he would finish and he would come back to the great Beis Midrash there in Shanghai, and he would walk inside, he would go over to his shtender and to his chair, he would sit down, pull out a Gemara, and he would start learning as if he was learning all day long with total concentration, total focus, not thinking or worrying about anything that he had done that day in the government office. And they said over, this is what the RAMBAM means. When you have a mitzvah that's EF Shalasas Halidei Acher, nobody else can do it, you have no choice. You have to go there. However, when you're doing that mitzvah, your mind is always on the next step, which is, once that I finish this, I'm getting back to my Gemara. Once I finish this chesed, I'm going back to the Beis Midrash. Once I complete this mitzvah, I'm going right back to where I was before, sitting and learning undisturbed. And therefore, v'yachzor l'toirasai, you go back to your Torah, you go back to right where you were before, as if you never left. And that's what the Rambam is saying over here. That the main ikar mitzvah that a person has in life is learning Torah. Sometimes you have to do other mitzvahs and you have no choice. But when you're doing the other mitzvah, you're always waiting for that moment when you'll be absolved and exempt and finished, and you'll be able to return. And then says the Rambam, don't forget, if you want to show HaKadosh Baruch Hu how much you believe in the sanctity and the glory and the importance of learning Torah, once you finish one mitzvah, you go right back to where you were before, to the Beis Midrash, to the Gemara, to the Shulchan Aruch, to the Rashi, to whatever it is that you are learning, so that you show yourself and you show Hashem the main mitzvah in life, which is the ikar, which is the main thing, is Talmud Torah, which is keneged kol ha-mitzvahs kulai. Have a wonderful day.